Hello everyone. Today we are going to see about gastric juices, and in the gastric juices we are going to see about definition, introduction, contents of gastric juices, types of cells, mechanism of HCl secretion, steps for gastric juice secretion, and the last one would be the function of gastric juices. So let's get started. Gastric juice or stomach acid, also known as stomach acid. And the definition of it is gastric juice or stomach acid. It's a different name for gastric juice. It is a digestive fluid from within the stomach lining. So gastric juice is basically a digestive fluid which is formed within the lining of stomach, and it has the pH between 1 to 3. So as it is between 1 to 3, we know that it is very acidic in nature, and the gastric acid plays a key role in digestion of proteins by activating digestive enzymes. So gastric acid plays a very important role in digestion of proteins by activating digestive enzymes, and which together break down the long chain of amino acids of protein. So what basically is said here is that gastric juice is very important for the breaking down of protein by the enzymes called pepsin. How we are going to see it later. So don't get confused. It's just a definition of it. We will get to know everything in detail in the later slides. So next one is introduction of gastric juice. So as we have seen in the previous slide that it is a digestive fluid from within the stomach lining. It is from within the lining of stomach, and the gastric juice is a mixture of water and variable solid substances. So gastric juice is a mixture of water and variable solid substances, and the water content is 99.5%, and the solid substance contents are just 0.5%. So majority of digestive fluids is water. We are Don't worry, we are going to see it in the later slides. And the next one is the juice is highly acidic in nature. The juice is highly acidic because of its HCl acid content, and it is rich in enzymes. So that gastric juice is very acidic in nature because of the presence of HCl, and the acid has a pH value of 1 to 3. So we know that it is a very strong acid, and the digestive juice is highly rich in the enzymes, and the digestive juice is highly rich in enzymes such as pepsin, gastric juice, gastric lipase. These are some types of enzymes present in gastric juices. And the next one is the mixing of waves, which are peristaltic waves, causing mixing of food with gastric juice and convert the food into semi-solid chyme. Chyme is a pulpy acid fluid consisting of gastric juice and partly digested food. So what it is said here is that when we eat food, the food get mixed up with the digestive juices by the peristaltic waves. Peristaltic waves is peristaltic waves are basically the contraction and relaxation of muscles, just like the way the contraction and relaxation happens in our esophagus. So just like that, the same peristaltic waves happens in our stomach, and it helps getting the food mixed up with the gastric juices and to get it digested. And when the food and the gastric juices and the food are combined together, they form a pulpy acid fluid. They form a pulpy acid fluid. So it is a it's when the food and the so what does it mean here is that when the food and the gastric juices get mixed together, it forms a jelly like texture, and that jelly like texture is known as chyme. The next one is the stomach secrete the gastric juices. When no food is present, very small quantity of juice is secreted and vice versa. So it is what is meant by the sentence is that when we eat food, of course the gastric juice would be secreted in our stomach. But when we don't eat any food, it doesn't mean that our stomach don't secrete any kind of gastric juices. Our stomach do secrete gastric juices, but in very little quantity, and that's what this line means. And now the note is that our stomach has the ability of knowing when you will eat and start releasing digestive juices immediately. But if you start drinking water at the same time, the water will dilute the gastric acid, thereby making it difficult for the juice to digest the food. So what is meant here is that when we eat food, when we eat food, there is gastric juices start to secrete in our stomach, and which which has a function of digesting that food. But if we drink water in between that meals, so that water would dilute the gastric juices or the HCl acid in our stomach, and it will weaken their ability to digest the food. So it is always advised to drink the water at least 1 hour before the meal or 1 hour after the meal, and not in between the meals, since it will dilute the digestive juices, and it won't be that effective if it is diluted form. So this is example, and so this is a very important note you should keep in mind. That now it is the contents of normal gastric juices, means what are the things are present in gastric juices. So the volume means the quantity of the gastric juices. It is 500 to 1000 ml, means zero point 0.5 to 1 liter of gastric juices are presented, is secreted in one in an adult. So 500 to 1000 ml of gastric juices is secreted in adult, and the nature of acidic gastric juice is acidic, since its pH value is between 1 to 3, and the constituents of gastric juice is water and solid. So it has two constituents, water and solid. The water is in majority, it has 99.5%, and solid is 0.5%. And under the solid there comes inorganic constituents. And what are the substances in inorganic constituents? These are HCl, KCl, CaCl2, and NaCl, etc. And there is another branch for the solid substances, that is organic constituents. The organic constituents consist of enzymes, that is pepsin, gastric lipase, gastric amylase. So the pepsin is responsible for digesting proteins, the gastric lipase is responsible for digesting fats, and the gastric amylase is responsible for digesting the carbohydrates. And the other branch of organic constituents are other inorganic substances, such as mucus and intrinsic factor. Mucus, we all know, it is a lining on the stomach. It is lining on the stomach to protect our stomach lining from the harmful effect of HCl, since it is very acidic in nature. And the intrinsic factor here is meant by the it is intrinsic factor is a type of a glycoprotein which is responsible for absorption of vitamin B12. So now these are types of cells. Cell types, there are parietal cells, and the substance secreted by parietal cells are HCl and intrinsic factor. And the function of HCl is that the HCl kills the microbes and activates the pepsinogen. What is the pepsinogen meant here is that pepsinogen is an inactive form of pepsin. So HCl activate the pepsinogen into pepsins, and pepsin helps us to digest the proteins. And the other substance secreted by parietal cell is intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is an a glycoprotein which helps us in absorption of vitamin B12. That's the function of intrinsic factor. The second one is chief cells. The chief cells consist of pepsinogen and gastric lipase. Again, the pepsinogen, it's activated by HCl. It is activated by HCl, and it converts into pepsin and digests the proteins. That's the function of pepsinogen. And the other one is gastric lipase. The gastric lipase again helps us in digestion of fat. And the third one is G cells. G cells are responsible for secretion of his gastrin. So G cells secretes gastrin, and the function of gastrin is that it stimulates the gastric acid secretion. And the fourth one is ECL cells. ECL cells are responsible for production or secretion of histamine. The histamine also has the same function as gastrin, as it stimulates the secretion of gastric acid. And the fifth one is mucous neck cells. The mucous neck cells secrete the mucus and bicarbonate. So the two substances secreted by the mucous neck cells are mucus, and the second one is bicarbonate. So mucus and bicarbonate helps us in protecting the stomach epithelial from acid. So the stomach lining is made up from the epithelial cells, and the mucus helps to protect that epithelial from the strong acid, that is from HCl. And the last one is D cells. The D cells secrete somatostain that inhibits the gastric acid secretion. So that was all the cell types present in our stomach. So the next slide is going to be of mechanism of HCl secretion. So I'm going to explain you this mechanism of acid secretion in a very simplified way. So first of all, what it says is that you know that stomach has numerous gastric glands, and these glands have cells called parietal cells. So parietal cells are mainly responsible for the secretion of HCl, and how that HCl is secreted in our stomach, that we are going to see here in this mechanism.